Hello and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Jo Wheatley, and my friend and co-host Zoe Hawkins.
Hi, everybody. Great to be back again for another episode. And today we're talking about a typical coaching journey because we want to demystify coaching. Not everybody knows what coaching is in practice and in reality. So we're going to share with you a little bit about the coaching journey that you as a client might go on.
Yeah, so perhaps we'll start with what we often use, which is a pre-coaching questionnaire. So that might be a surprise to some of you listening and thinking, well, whoa, okay, it starts before that conversation. So typically what would happen is you'd have a chemistry call. And the purpose of the chemistry call with your potential coachee is to explore whether there's a match between you as coach and coachee. And you talk at a fairly high level about what the coachee would hope to get out of the coaching relationship. You talk about, the different, the length of the coaching program, what coaching is, what coaching isn't, all of that kind of things. And if they decide at the end of that they want to progress with the coaching program, we would typically send them a pre-coaching questionnaire. And the purpose of the pre-coaching questionnaire is to orientate the coachee to the coaching and also to accelerate the coaching, because it is a tool which does a bit of a deep dive, or helps the coachee to do a bit of a deep dive into themselves, where they are now, where they want to get to, and a little bit about their previous experience as well.
Yeah. And as coaches, obviously, we're trained to look at these pre-coaching questionnaires. And we're not really just looking at the pre-coaching questionnaire to see, oh, who's my client and what do they do? And we're looking at it to be starting to think, how do they think? And what is the way in which they see the world? And through looking at their writing and how they've answered the questions, we're able to start to identify what their values might be, what some of the limiting beliefs might be that they hold. These are all assumptions at this stage that we're gathering. But as coaches, we're really getting a head start in starting to see the world through our clients' eyes, so that when they arrive in the first session for their coaching session, we've got firstly, we feel like we've got a connection to them. And the work that they want to do. We've got an understanding of what they want to get out of the coaching and the outcomes and results that they're looking for. And we also have a start around forming some opinions around how that coaching relationship might shape up, and what are some of the things that might be useful as that client goes on their coaching journey. So I personally love the pre-coaching questionnaire. I know not all coaches do it. Not all coaches do a pre sort of diagnostic, but it is something that is a really valuable part of my coaching. And I know it is for you as well, Jo.
It's just so exciting, to be honest, because you have that chemistry call and you get a little glimpse into the person, but it's obviously very tiny little insight. And when you receive the pre-coaching questionnaire and you kind of just take that time in peace and quiet just to read through it and really, as you say, kind of step into the coachee's eyes and lenses on the world, there's often surprises, and there are surprises. You might have a coachee who in the chemistry conversation was quite wordy and generous in what they share with you, and the pre-coaching questionnaire might be quite short, sharp answers, and they might not have shared very much with you, and you thought this client was going to give you everything about their life. And other coachees might obviously be the obvious, the opposite experience, and there's lots of other different surprises that will come up in it. And the other thing that I find exciting is in that first session that we use to debrief on the pre-coaching questionnaire, and we ask the coachee, how did you find completing the pre-coaching questionnaire? And they will say that it's the first time in their whole life that they've ever sat down and really looked at their whole life in one go. And I remember in the early days of coaching being shocked by that and thinking, is it true? Like, had I never done that? Is it true that the individual has never done that? And maybe that's something for you that are listening to reflect on and think, have you ever had that experience of sitting down and have you ever had that experience of sitting down and reflecting on your whole life through the lens of personal, professional, past, present, and future? I even had one client once who said, I don't even think I need coaching anymore. It was so in-depth, the pre-coaching questionnaire. And that just shows the power of the tool. And it also can serve a purpose to and we talk about orientating them to the coaching, what the client thought they wanted to come to coaching for, and what they end up putting at the end of the document, which is really, so now what are your goals and what does success look like in terms of those goals. They can alter from that chemistry conversation to the completion of it. And they can also alter again as we then move into the debrief and we start to look at the patterns or the connections between things in the pre-coaching questionnaire, those values you mentioned, beliefs. There might be some limiting beliefs that are actually preventing them from even articulating what it is they really want.
Well, people are busy, aren't they? And I think that's why the pre-coaching questionnaire is so powerful, because it kind of forces you to sit down and do that reflective piece. Now, obviously, you don't have to do that. You can opt to start the coaching relationship, perhaps not filling that in if it's not your style. But I would say that 95% of clients choose to complete the pre-coaching questionnaire in some fashion. So that's kind of the starting point. So the pre-coaching questionnaire is what preludes into the first session. And then the client comes to the first session. And what do we do in that first coaching session? Well, a lot of that coaching session is about contracting. So it's continuing some of the conversation you had in the chemistry conversation around how does that client need me to be as your coach? What level of support or challenge does that client want to experience in the coaching relationship? It's understanding how the client might sabotage their efforts of success and achievement, and what are some of the habits that the client is aware of, and how do they want me as the coach to help and support them through that. So you're starting to clear any obstacles out of the way that might come into that coaching relationship and create stickiness or otherwise slow your client down. So there's a contracting phase. And of course, the goals are important. So really clarifying what the outcomes are that the client wants to experience as part of the coaching. And I think at this stage, it's really important to mention that some clients won't know. So they're coming to coaching in order to get clarity. And so their outcome might be about having a deeper understanding of themselves or what they need or where they might go next. And clarity itself is the goal, which is absolutely fine, and that first session is really about you and your client co-creating the coaching relationship so that you're aligned. I think one other thing I would say on this is that it's also important as the coach to check in what the client wants to get from that session, because more and more I'm working with clients who have a specific idea of what they want to get out of that first coaching session. So yes, they want the goals and they want the contracting, but it might be that they have a really pressing engagement coming up in that following week that they want to, hold some space for to explore that and get some clarity on how they're going to handle that particular event or piece that's coming up in the future. So it's a busy first session with lots of ground to cover.
Yeah, and it can be messy is what we're saying. So whilst you train to be a coach and it all looks neat and tidy, we actually share with our coachees, those that are in training, that it's not always going to fit neatly into that. It's your job as the coach to be able to manage the time, to know what you're going to, don't start something that you can't complete in an ideal world. So as you move into session 2, it's when you will complete some of that goals work if it hasn't yet been complete. So as you move into session 2, it's where you'll start some new stuff. You might explore what their values are in relation to the goal that they want to achieve, but you might also need to finish off some of the goals work from session 1, and getting real clarity around what their goal is and also what those success criteria are and what's important to them about achieving that goal. And the values work can take a whole session or even more than a session. There's usually some homework or heart work to do around the values or more reflections that the coachee wants to have around that. But that values alignment is really important for the coachee to see and experience and understand.
Yeah. And the coaching journey, whilst we can sort of talk about this typically happens in session 1 and this typically happens in session 2, actually it's the client who drives the coaching journey. So they may arrive in session 2 with a very clear outcome of what they want to get from session 2. So that might look like, actually, I've got my my presentation to the board next week, around my strategic direction for my unit, and I want to be clear and confident around how I'm going to present that. And you'd need to, as the coach, look at, does that fit into their overall journey goal? So if their journey goal perhaps is to increase their influence and their impact as a leader, then that fits. If their goal is to explore their career direction, then potentially this doesn't fit. And so there, as the coach, you're going to be doing some contracting again with your client to explore how their outcome for that session fits into the overall journey that you're going on together. And of course, there are those clients who will arrive at the second session and be, I don't really know. I'm not sure what I want to bring to this session. And that's where, as the coach, you need to sort of, play in that space of making decisions around, do you offer some suggestions, that you might do, as Joe alluded to there, a values elicitation and do some more work on the values, or you might choose to explore strengths and talents in relation to what they're bringing, that might be based around their goal. Or do you hold that tension and inquire around how come the client isn't sure what they want to bring? And is this an emerging theme or pattern around them not being clear or certain, perhaps, about the direction that they're going in? So it's, it's co-created again, this second session. And you'll have decisions to make as the coach around where you perhaps lean in more, or you step back and let the client drive.
Yeah, I find that with most of my clients, it is that real balance between the deep dive into topics and the practical day-to-day. And the two overlap, but it's also about energy. It's checking in with the client. What do they have energy for? So whilst they might recognize that there is a pattern or a deeper issue that they want to explore that would be valuable to them, it also depends on what the rest of their day has been like before they arrive in that coaching session, or what they've got coming up after that session. So that balance is really important. And as a coach, I think it's also about that managing the time is not just in the individual session, but it's also across the whole of the coaching program, and creating that spaciousness, and also monitoring if there's avoidance going on, and as you say, how far to push back. So yeah, you're co-creating it. And then we move into session 3.
Yeah, and what we're really doing is following a bit of a pattern of, session 1 was obviously co-creating the relationship and starting to understand what your client wants. And as you move into session 2, you're helping the client to understand how they see the world, and perhaps starting to look in the mirror to see what are some of the things that might be challenging them, or blocking them, or getting in the way of whatever it is they're trying to achieve. So by session 3, you might move more into a challenging space around. So having identified perhaps a couple of things that are getting in their way, now we might need to start work on changing some of that perspective or some of those beliefs, and starting to move the obstacles to one side. And this can be about mindset work. It can be about making connections between things that have happened in the past that are holding them back in the present, so that they can move forward to the future. It can be about holding space for emotions that arise as part of that discussion. It can also be about tapping into the strengths and talents and resources that are going to empower your client to be able to take the next step in their journey. So by session 3, really is starting to get into the meat of the coaching around the goals and outcomes that your client wants to achieve for their journey goal, and starting to pick off the different obstacles that are getting in their way.
Yeah, and when we talk about the past, an example of that might be helping them to identify their beliefs in relation to achieving a goal. So both the positive, empowering ones, but also the limiting or negative beliefs that might be getting in the way. And that work is related to the past, actually. When were they created, for what purpose, how relevant is that to now? Recognizing the change, or doing some change work around the beliefs. And that session is a kind of like breaking the mold, breaking the boundaries kind of a session, because whilst you're looking at those beliefs in relation to a particular goal, they have much wider ramifications. And that's where we get into the really transformational nature or potential of the coaching relationship.
You often hear coaching described as unlocking a person's potential. I think that was John Whitmore's quote around grow, isn't it? And and it's a bit of a buzzword, I think, unlocking a person's potential. The thing about potential is it's hidden. We don't know what we are capable of. And I think what happens in coaching is you start to really understand what you are capable of if you didn't have these things in the way, or if you were able to look at life or circumstance or opportunity through a different lens. And so here in session 3 and moving into session 4, what you're really doing as the coach is helping to open the client's eyes up to opportunity and untapped resources that perhaps they haven't used, or ways of seeing and experiencing the world that they haven't been able to, for whatever reason, see before. And that opens up opportunity to learn new things, to grow into new spaces. And it is a huge source of growth, of personal growth and development. So if that's session 3, what's left for session 4?
more of the same, essentially. So when you train to be a coach, you're trained, in lots of different modalities, really. In your foundational kind of coaching training, you'll tend to get an introduction into lots of different modalities. And so you'll again speak to your coachee. Where are we at? We are now halfway through the coaching program. What's been working well? What do we need to dial up? What do we need to dial back? What are your reflections so far? What's left to do? And you meet them there, and you'll draw on your knowledge, your skills, and your experience as a coach to be able to engage in the conversation and contribute to that in a way that will help the coachee to get what they need from that particular session. And that could be drawing on different tools or insights from transactional analysis or gestalt or emotional intelligence or different things. Like often at that stage that you will have been able to share with your coachee patterns or inquire about patterns that you think you might have noticed. So when the coachee says something, and you might reflect back to them and say, that's really interesting you say that, because in your pre-coaching questionnaire and in session 2 and 3 you said that, but today you're saying that. Can you share with me a bit more about that? And that might unlock or open up new insight, which means that neither of you knew necessarily what you had an idea of what you might focus on in let's say session 4, but then as you kind of inquire in these areas, the coachee might be like, did I really say that? Have I really shifted? That's really interesting. I haven't noticed that. I think I need to think more about the use of my language, as an example. Say, is that something you'd like to focus on today? Would it be of value to you? And they might say yes. And so then you might work on that. So it will be in relation to their goal, but everything that we work on is so interconnected with everything else.
Coaching layers, doesn't it? If I think about some of the personal journeys that I've been on through coaching, I remember I was exploring around kind of motivation, engagement, and achievement. And what I discovered was that unless I take risks and use courage, I don't experience the sense of achievement I want to experience. So that was a revelation for me through coaching. So I was like, okay, so I need to set bigger, more daring, goals that enable me to be courageous. Great. So I did that. But then what I was finding once I was able to tick that one off, is this new layer emerged of like, okay, so now I'm feeling more anxious and now I'm feeling more nervous about that. So it was handling almost the byproduct of being able to take one step on the journey, because no goal, if it's set stretchy enough, is going to be achieved in just one step. So you're there as the coach, working through the layers of growth with somebody in that coaching relationship. And if you've got 6 sessions, and that's really what you're doing in those remainder of those sessions, is checking in with where are we now? So moving then into session 5, you're starting to pace your client around, right, we've got 2 sessions left. We've got this one and the next one. The next one is going to be largely, reviewing, reflecting on your growth and future pacing around what you want to do. So what's left in this session that you need support with in order to achieve your outcome? So session 5 is really about nothing brand new being dropped into the coaching space. Sometimes that happens. And if that does, you have to manage that with your clients. But it's about continuing that journey of growth and working with, obviously, as you said, Jo, the tools and resources that you've got to support the client in the continued evolution towards their outcomes.
And then we have session 6, which, as you say, is largely a review session. It's about honoring all that's been, exploring the support they need moving forwards, what goals are they setting themselves moving forwards, and it's about gratitude. It's about acknowledging actually the huge amount of effort that the coachee has put into it, because it's the coachee that creates the change. We are there to facilitate that insight, hold that space, but it's them that really does the work, and so much of the work also happens outside of the coaching sessions. So that's a really beautiful session to have.
Yeah. Now, of course, not all coaching relationships are successions. I coach leaders who are at a crossroads making big decisions, and we might do that in 4 sessions. Equally, both you and I work with people on a long-term basis that are maybe on a CEO pathway, that are looking to build their skills over a long period of time to take on a role at a board level or at a senior leadership team level. But the concept is the same. You meet your client where they're at, you decide together what their outcomes are going to be, and you facilitate that journey. As the coach, you just have to manage that, be it 4 sessions, 6 sessions, or over the course of a long-term period.
So we hope that that's helped to demystify what a coaching experience or program might look like. What are the themes, some of the themes that might come up? We started off by talking about a little bit about the chemistry conversation that flows into the pre-coaching questionnaire for us. And we have a couple of different, well, more than 2 or 3 different types of pre-coaching questionnaires. And that's always a voluntary offer to our coachees. And then we have session 1. We talked about the debriefing, the clarity on the goals, moving through into sessions 2, 3, and 4 as we get more into the change work that is coaching, and then we move and transition into the future pacing part of it, and wrapping up the coaching engagement. If you're thinking, I'd love to do that, I'd love to be a coach and be able to facilitate that kind of transformational, positive, sustained change for people, and you want to come and train to be a coach, then first point really, beyond listening to the podcast, is to complete our quiz at mycoachingcourse.com, or you can come straight to our website, igcompany.co.uk, where you can book your place.
Yeah. And of course, we have the book. So the book is also another great resource. So that's Deciding to Coach, which is available on Amazon and is a great resource for any of you who are thinking about creating a career in coaching.